The Chauchat light machine gun is one of the most infamous weapons of World War I. You've probably seen it before. The odd-looking automatic rifle with the half-moon magazine and skeletal frame. It was supposed to give French and American troops portable firepower in the trenches. A revolutionary concept at the time. But in practice it became something else entirely, because the Chauchat didn't just jam, it didn't just malfunction. It got people killed, and not the enemy, its own gunners. Soldiers who carried it into battle quickly realised that the real danger wasn't always coming from across no man's land. Sometimes it was slung right over their shoulder. The Chauchat earned its reputation the hard way, by failing catastrophically at the worst possible moments. In the mud, in the rain, under fire. It jammed, it overheated, it misfired, it exposed its crew. And it did all of that a lot. Troops had to clear jams while enemy rounds snapped over their heads. The open magazine design sucked in dirt and debris like a sponge. And when the gun did fire, it often kicked so wildly, or cycled so unpredictably, it was hard to control. French troops called it le fusil mitrailleur, but many frontline soldiers had a simpler name for it. The Widowmaker. And once American doughboys got their hands on it, the horror stories only got worse. This is the story of how one machine gun, rushed to the front lines, poorly built and criminally misunderstood, became more dangerous to the men behind it than the ones in front. Let's take a closer look. The Chauchat was France's answer to a growing problem in World War I. How to give infantry automatic firepower without hauling around a heavy crew-served gun. So they built a light machine gun. At least that's what they called it. The official name was the Fusil Mitrailleur Modèle 1915 CSRG. It weighed just under 20 pounds, used the standard 8mm Liebel cartridge, and came with a 20-round magazine. On paper, it was everything a modern army wanted. It could be fired from the hip, slung across the back, even shot on the move. But in reality, it was junk. The gun was rushed into production with almost no quality control. The infamous open-sided magazine, designed so soldiers could check their ammo, turned into a magnet for mud, dust and trench filth. Out in the field it jammed constantly. Misfires, runaways, broken parts. Barrels overheated after just a few mags. Springs warped. The sights were often useless. And worst of all, many of these guns were built so badly, they didn't even fit together properly. This wasn't just a bad weapon, it was a deadly liability for the man carrying it. Most machine guns kill the enemy. This one killed patients and sometimes its own crew. The Chauchat's biggest flaw was the open-sided magazine. It looked clever, curved to match the shape of the 8mm Liebel round, with big cutouts so you could see how many rounds were left. But in trench warfare, that design was suicidal. Mud poured in, dirt clogged the feed lips. A single drop of rain could mix with grime and glue the rounds in place. Soldiers would pull the trigger, and nothing would happen. Then came the jams. To clear it, you had to remove the magazine, strip the gun, clean the chamber and reload, all while under fire. And if you didn't do it fast enough, well, let's just say medics were busy. The gun's long recoil system didn't help either. Every shot made the barrel slide back, then slam forward again, throwing off aim and rhythm. It kicked like a mule and cycled like a tractor with a broken belt. Worse, some parts were just badly built. The bipod legs bent easily, the buttstock could crack under pressure. And the trigger, sometimes it stuck. Other times it didn't stop firing even after you let go. That's not combat stress, that's a design flaw. It was supposed to be the first truly portable automatic rifle. Instead, it became the first lesson in what happens when you rush a weapon into war without listening to the guys who have to use it. Most machine guns are dangerous if you're on the wrong side of the barrel. The Chauchat was dangerous no matter where you stood. One of its ugliest flaws, runaway fire. If the gun overheated, which it often did, it could start firing on its own, no trigger pull. Just a sudden burst as the metal expanded and a round cooked off in the chamber. Now imagine you're in a tight trench, surrounded by your own men. Your weapon starts spitting bullets without warning. It happened, and when it jammed, which was basically every other magazine, the gunner had no choice but to expose himself, stand up, and clear it. Mid-firefight, with enemy rifles zeroed in. Some never made it back down. Others were hit by their own panicked squad mates, not knowing where the burst came from, only that someone was firing wildly in the wrong direction. To make it worse, the Chauchat's recoil often forced gunners to reposition constantly. It wasn't accurate. It wasn't smooth. If the bipod slipped or the ground was uneven, the gun could kick sideways with each shot. In some cases, the shooter wasn't even sure where his rounds were going. Combine that with a malfunction mid-attack, and the gun became more of a hazard than a help. In a war where every inch of ground was earned with blood, the Chauchat turned supposed fire support into a coin toss. And too many times the coin came up fatal. If you think this all sounds exaggerated, it's not. Ask the men who actually had to carry it. American troops who arrived in France in 1917 were issued the Chauchat almost immediately. The US Army didn't have a portable automatic rifle of its own yet, so they took what the French offered. But they quickly realised they'd been handed a death trap. In one unit, and every single Chauchat jammed during a live fire exercise, before they even made it to the front. Some soldiers ditched the weapon entirely, preferring to go into combat with just a bolt-action Springfield, rather than trust the Chauchat. Others weren't so lucky. Corporal Oscar Johnson, part of the 36th Division, described it as more dangerous to us than the Hun. He told his commanding officer the gun jammed every 10 rounds, and clearing it took more time than reloading 3 rifles. Another doughboy wrote home saying, "If I had to storm a trench with this thing again, I'd rather take a shovel." In some cases, American troops scavenged captured German MG8s or even old Lewis guns just to avoid carrying the Chauchat into battle again. It wasn't just frustrating, it was demoralising. Imagine knowing your only automatic weapon might fail the moment you needed it most. Imagine knowing that fixing it might get you killed. Imagine the sheer helplessness of watching a buddy go down because the gun jammed instead of firing. These aren't myths. These are real accounts from real men who survived the trenches, and some who didn't. The Chauchat didn't just fail mechanically, it failed the people who had to trust their lives to it. With all the failures, you'd think the Chauchat would have been scrapped early on, but it wasn't. In fact, over 262,000 were made. Why? Because by the time the war hit full swing, armies weren't looking for perfect weapons. They were looking for enough weapons. The French military was bleeding men every day. They needed something, anything, that could put out suppressive fire without needing a 4-man crew to haul it. The Chauchat was cheap, it was fast to make. It didn't require advanced tooling or materials. Most importantly, it was already in production when the United States entered the war. So when American units arrived and asked for automatic rifles, the French handed them Chauchats, sometimes poorly converted to .306, with even worse tolerances than the original. The result? Guns that didn't feed right, magazines that didn't align, weapons that jammed before even being fired in combat. But it was too late to change course. Logistics couldn't keep up with demand. The US hadn't fielded the Browning automatic rifle yet. And for a brief, miserable window, in 1917 and 1918, the Chauchat was the only game in town. Commanders knew it was flawed, troops hated it, but the war didn't care, so they kept handing it out, because in the eyes of the high command, a broken machine gun was better than no machine gun. Tell that to the poor guy stuck behind one. By the end of World War I, the Chauchat had earned a reputation unlike any other, not as a hero maker, but as a cautionary tale. Even after the war, it stuck around. A few ended up in smaller conflicts, like the Polish-Soviet War, the Finnish Civil War, and even early World War II resistance units. But the verdict never changed. It was unreliable, it was fragile, and in many cases it was deadly, to the wrong side. Historians still debate how it passed inspection, how it stayed in service for so long, and why commanders kept issuing it, even after clear reports from the front. It wasn't the concept that failed. The idea of a lightweight automatic rifle was solid, but the execution, absolutely disastrous. The Chauchat is often ranked among the worst military weapons ever fielded in large numbers. And for good reason. It didn't just cost time or momentum on the battlefield, it cost lives. Today it sits behind museum glass, a weird, ugly relic from a brutal war. But if you ask anyone who had to use one, they'll tell you it doesn't belong in a display case. It belongs in the list of weapons that never should have made it past the drawing board. The Chauchat wasn't the first bad weapon ever built, but it might be the most lethal example of what happens when rushed design, poor manufacturing, and battlefield desperation collide. It was meant to save lives by giving infantry a fighting chance, but instead it became a source of dread, a weapon soldiers feared almost as much as the enemy. For many it was a death sentence with a trigger, and yet it tells us something important. Not just about war, but about the people in it. Because even with all its failures, men still carried it, still fought with it, still tried to make it work when everything else fell apart. Some survived, many didn't. And the ones who did never forgot what it meant to rely on a gun you couldn't trust. The Chauchat isn't just a bad weapon from history. It's a reminder that in war, the deadliest enemy isn't always out in front. Sometimes it's the gear on your back.